My cruel mother-in-law ordered me to clean the floor 2 days before my twins' birthday. I refused, and she angrily snatched my twins' milk feeder and pushed the baby cart hard against the wall, then locked the door. The twins were crying loudly when suddenly my husband arrived and immediately opened the door. Fueled by anger, I plotted my revenge, and the very next day, I unveiled a shocking surprise that would change everything. My name is Julia, and I am a 32-year-old teacher living in Chicago, Illinois. I've been meaning to share my story, not just for myself, but as a warning to others who might find themselves in a similar situation. My journey is one filled with love, betrayal, and the fight for justice, and it all began with the kind of hope that comes with falling in love. Ethan and I met through our mothers, who had been friends for years. They often reminisced about their younger days, and when they discovered we were both single, they saw it as an opportunity to play matchmaker. I remember the first time Ethan and I met at a cafe. It was a bit awkward at first, but as we talked about our shared love for action movies and pizza, the initial tension melted away. He was charming and attentive, and I felt an immediate connection. Over the following weeks, we continued to see each other, and before long, we were inseparable. We married less than a year later, and I believed we had a bright future ahead of us. But there was one cloud looming over our happiness: Ethan's mother, Martha. At first, I tried to be understanding. After all, she was his mother, and I wanted to get along. However, as the weeks turned into months, her presence began to overshadow our lives. Martha moved in with us shortly after our wedding due to some financial issues, or so she claimed. Initially, I didn't mind. I thought it would be nice to have family around, especially when we decided to start a family of our own. But soon, I realized that living with her was like living in a pressure cooker. She had this way of controlling everything, from the groceries we bought to the way I managed our home. When I became pregnant with twins, my physical health took a toll. The morning sickness was relentless, and as the months progressed, my body ached in ways I never expected. I was exhausted, struggling to balance my teaching job, the housework, and preparing for the twins' arrival. After one particularly grueling day, I suggested to Ethan that we should hire a maid to help around the house. "Martha, it's too much for me right now," I pleaded, sitting down with Ethan one evening. "I can't keep up with everything." Ethan nodded, understanding my concerns. "I think that's a great idea, Jules. I'll talk to my mom about it." But that plan was swiftly shot down when I mentioned it to Martha the next day. "Absolutely not," she snapped, crossing her arms. "There's no need for a maid. I can handle everything just fine." "But Martha, I'm pregnant with twins. It's not easy for me to keep up," I argued, trying to sound calm. She waved her hand dismissively. "You need to toughen up. It's your responsibility to manage the house, and I won't have anyone else in my home." The conversation left me feeling helpless and defeated. I had hoped for support, but instead, I felt like a servant in my own home. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself increasingly frustrated with Martha's demands. She expected me to cook, clean, and prepare for the twins while she did little more than sit on the couch and criticize my efforts. As my due date approached, the stress mounted. One afternoon, as I lay on the couch, I felt sudden, sharp pains. Panic gripped me. Ethan was at work, and I needed to get to the hospital, but Martha was there, sprawled out in the living room, oblivious to my distress. "Martha," I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "I think I'm going into labor. I need to go to the hospital." She glanced up briefly before turning back to the TV. "That's your problem, Julia. Handle it yourself." I was stunned by her coldness. Desperation surged through me, and I grabbed my phone, calling Ethan. "Please, I need you. I think the babies are coming." His voice was laced with concern. "I'm on my way, Julia. Just hold on." The wait felt like an eternity, but Ethan finally arrived, and together we rushed to the hospital. The delivery was intense, and after what felt like hours, I finally heard the cries of my twins, a boy and a girl. Ethan's face lit up with joy as he held them for the first time, but my heart was heavy. The reality of our living situation loomed over me. When we returned home the next day, I was exhausted but eager to begin this new chapter with our children. However, my relief was short-lived. Martha wasted no time in demanding that I take care of the household chores. "Julia, you need to clean this place up," she ordered, her arms crossed as she stood in the kitchen. "The house looks like a disaster." I stared at her, incredulous. "Martha, I just had twins. I need time to rest and bond with them." She huffed. "You're not the only one living here. I expect you to pull your weight." That day, I felt my frustration boiling over. It wasn't just about the chores. It was about the way Martha treated me, like I was nothing more than a maid in my own home. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but as I looked at my babies, I realized I needed to stand my ground. It was in that moment of anger and sadness that I resolved to do something about Martha's behavior. I couldn't let her control our lives anymore, not when it affected my children. I just didn't know how I would confront her. But deep down, I knew I had to protect my family at all costs. The struggle was just beginning, and I had to prepare myself for what lay ahead. After bringing the twins home, I thought things would settle down, but Martha's control only tightened. Each day felt like a battle between her demands and my need to care for my newborns. Ethan was supportive, but he was often at work, and I found myself alone, navigating the chaos. One afternoon, as I fed the twins, Martha burst into the living room, hands on her hips. "Julia, the house is a mess. You really need to start taking this seriously. It looks like a tornado hit it." I looked around, overwhelmed. Toys were scattered, and a few dirty dishes sat in the sink. But I was doing my best. "Martha, I just gave birth to 2 babies. I'm doing the best I can here." "Your best isn't good enough," she shot back, her voice cold. "You can't expect me to live in filth. Get it together." Frustration bubbled inside me, and I fought back tears. It felt like I was drowning, suffocated by her demands and expectations. I wanted to scream, to tell her that I was a mother now, not just her daughter-in-law. But every time I opened my mouth, her piercing gaze silenced me. As the days passed, I noticed more troubling signs of Martha's disregard for the twins. One day, I was in the kitchen preparing a bottle for my daughter when I heard her cries from the nursery. I rushed in to find Martha standing by the crib, looking exasperated. "Can you not control them? They've been crying for ages," she snapped. "Martha, they're newborns. They cry. It's what they do," I replied, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "Not for this long," she retorted, pushing the stroller harshly as if to quiet them. My heart sank. The way she handled my children made my skin crawl. Determined to document her behavior, I decided to install hidden cameras in the nursery. I needed proof of what I suspected. Martha's treatment of my twins was neglectful at best. It was a risky move, but I felt I had no choice. I couldn't let her harm my children without consequences. With the cameras set up, I watched over the next few days, horrified by what I saw. Martha would often ignore the twins' cries, leaving them to wail, while she focused on her own needs. I recorded instances where she would harshly shove the stroller or refuse to feed them when they were hungry. Each video I reviewed filled me with anger and fear for my children's safety. One evening, after another long day of her neglect, I sat down with Ethan to discuss everything. "Ethan, I can't keep living like this. I'm worried about the twins. I've installed cameras because I need to show you what she's doing." He looked taken aback. "Cameras? Why would you do that?" "Because I need evidence. She's treating them poorly, Ethan. You have to see this." I felt a surge of desperation, my heart pounding as I spoke. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded. "Okay, let's watch it together." As we sat on the couch, I loaded the footage. I watched Ethan's expression change from confusion to disbelief as he witnessed Martha's behavior. He was silent, his eyes glued to the screen, anger simmering just below the surface. After the last video ended, he turned to me, his face dark. "I can't believe she would do this. We have to confront her." My heart raced at the thought. "I know, but we have to be careful. She can be unpredictable." "I won't let her hurt you or the twins anymore," he said firmly. "It's time we set boundaries." The next day, we confronted Martha together. Ethan's face was set with determination as we walked into the living room where she sat, reading a magazine. "Martha," he began, his voice steady. "We need to talk about your behavior toward Julia and the twins." Her eyes narrowed. "What's this about?" "I don't have time for your accusations." "It's not an accusation. It's the truth," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "We have evidence of how you've treated the twins, and it's unacceptable." Her face went pale as Ethan showed her the recordings. She looked between us, the facade of control beginning to crumble. "Those are just moments taken out of context," she stammered, but the anger in her voice couldn't mask her fear. "Mom, this isn't okay." "You're endangering our children," Ethan said, his voice rising. "If you can't respect our family, you can't stay here." Martha's eyes flashed with indignation. "You think you can just throw me out? I'm your mother. I raised you. And I won't let you harm my wife or our children." Ethan shouted back, his voice shaking with emotion. The confrontation had reached a boiling point, and I felt a mix of fear and empowerment. For the first time, I saw Ethan stand up to his mother, and it filled me with hope. But I also knew this was just the beginning of a long fight. As Martha stormed off, her face flushed with rage, I felt a sense of dread settle in. This wouldn't be the end of it. We were now in a battle for our family's safety, and I had to be ready for whatever she might do next. The stakes were high, and I had to protect my children at all costs. The confrontation with Martha left an uncomfortable tension hanging in the air. Ethan and I both felt the aftermath like a storm brewing on the horizon, but we had crossed a threshold that couldn't be undone. He had stood up to her for the first time, but I could tell Martha wouldn't take this lightly. As I sat nursing the twins that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to escalate. The following days were tense. Martha retreated into herself, barely speaking to either of us. She moved through the house like a ghost, her silence deafening. I half expected her to lash out, but instead, she seemed to simmer with resentment. It was unnerving, and I found myself on edge, constantly checking the nursery cameras for any signs of her neglect. One afternoon, I was sitting on the couch with the twins when I heard the front door slam shut. I looked up to see Ethan entering, his face flushed. "I just got off the phone with my mom," he said, his voice tight. "What did she want?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "She's claiming that we're trying to keep her from her grandchildren," he replied, his jaw clenching. "She says she's going to tell everyone that we're unfit parents." My heart raced. Is she serious? She has no right to say that. We have proof of her neglect. "I know," Ethan said, running a hand through his hair. "But I'm worried she'll go to extreme lengths to prove her point. We need to be careful." I nodded, feeling the weight of our situation pressing down on me. I had hoped that confronting her would lead to some kind of resolution, but it seemed to have only fueled her anger. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of what Martha might do next. I had heard stories about how toxic family members could turn others against their own, and I didn't want that for my children. They deserve to grow up in a loving environment, free from fear and manipulation. As the sun rose the next morning, I decided to take proactive steps to protect my family. I began documenting everything: Martha's behavior, her comments, and the instances of neglect captured on the cameras. I created a detailed log, noting dates and times, alongside the video evidence. I knew that if it came to a legal battle, I needed to be prepared. Later that day, while the twins napped, I contacted a family lawyer I had found online. My heart pounded as I explained the situation, feeling both empowered and terrified. "I need to know my options," I said, my voice shaky. "I can't let her hurt my children." The lawyer listened attentively. "It sounds like you have valid concerns about your mother-in-law's behavior. With the evidence you've gathered, you could potentially file for a restraining order or take further legal action if necessary." I felt a mix of relief and dread wash over me. "What if she retaliates?" I asked. "We can help you with that," the lawyer assured me. "You have rights as a parent, and it's important to protect your children." After our call, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I wasn't going to let Martha control our lives any longer. That evening, Ethan and I sat down again to discuss the lawyer's advice. "Julia, you've done everything right," he said, wrapping his arm around me as I held the twins. If this is what it takes to keep our family safe, we have to move forward. I nodded, grateful for his support. I just want to make sure they're safe. I can't bear the thought of her trying to take them away from us. The next week, we filed for a restraining order against Martha, detailing her neglect and the emotional abuse we had endured. The process was nerve-wracking, but I felt a sense of relief with each step we took. I was reclaiming control of my life and my family. However, just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, I received a call from the lawyer. "Julia, we need to prepare for a hearing. Your mother-in-law is contesting the restraining order," he said, his voice serious. "What does that mean?" I felt the world tilt on its axis. "It means Martha will likely try to defend herself in court, and we need to be ready to present your evidence convincingly. This won't be easy, but you have a strong case," he reassured me. Ethan and I exchanged worried glances. The reality of facing Martha in court felt daunting, but I was determined to protect my children. As the day of the hearing approached, I spent every moment preparing, gathering evidence, and mentally preparing for the battle ahead. The stakes were high, and I knew that this was more than just a legal issue. It was about standing up against toxic familial control and protecting the ones I loved. As I held my twins close, I vowed to fight for their future, no matter the cost. The fight was far from over, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The day of the hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of dread and determination as Ethan and I walked into the courthouse. The air was thick with tension, and my heart raced in my chest. I had prepared myself as best as I could, but facing Martha in a courtroom felt like stepping into the lion's den. We took our seats, and I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. Ethan held my hand tightly, his warmth grounding me as I focused on the task ahead. The room buzzed with chatter as we waited for the proceedings to begin, and I glanced around, spotting Martha across the room. She looked different, more put together than I'd ever seen her, her face a mask of determination. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. I felt my heart pound as we stood up to present our case. I had never been in a courtroom before, and the formalities made me feel small. But I was determined not to back down. The lawyer guided us through the process, and I tried to steady my breathing. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, my hands shaking slightly. "Your Honor, I'm here today because I need to protect my children from their grandmother's neglect and emotional abuse," I began, my voice steady despite my nerves. I spoke about Martha's behavior, detailing the incidents I had documented. I explained how her actions affected not only me but also the twins, emphasizing their safety and well-being. After I finished, my lawyer presented the video evidence. I watched the footage of Martha ignoring the twins' cries and treating them with indifference. Each clip was a painful reminder of what we had endured, but it was also a testament to my resolve. I could see the judge's expression shift as he absorbed the evidence. Then it was Martha's turn. She rose and attempted to paint herself as the victim, claiming I was exaggerating and that I was an unfit mother. Her words dripped with venom, and I felt the anger boiling inside me. "Your Honor," I interjected, finding my voice. "I'm not trying to keep my children from their grandmother. I just want to ensure they're safe and cared for. This is about protecting them." The judge looked at Martha with a stern expression. "This behavior is unacceptable. Children's welfare is my primary concern." After what felt like hours, the judge finally delivered his verdict. "Based on the evidence presented, I find that there is sufficient cause for concern regarding the well-being of the children. I am issuing a restraining order against Martha, prohibiting her from coming within a certain distance of the family." Relief flooded through me as I processed his words. The weight I had been carrying lifted slightly, but I knew this was just one battle won in an ongoing war. Martha's face twisted in rage as she realized the outcome, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of victory, knowing that I had stood up for my family. As we left the courthouse, Ethan wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. "We did it, Jules," he whispered, his voice filled with pride. "You were amazing in there." I smiled, tears of relief spilling down my cheeks. "I couldn't have done it without you, Ethan. Thank you for standing by me." In the weeks that followed, We focused on rebuilding our family life, free from Martha's toxic influence. I learned to set boundaries, to put my children first, and to trust my instincts as a mother. The twins thrived in the peaceful environment we created, and I found joy in the little moments. Each coo, each giggle, and each milestone felt like a victory. Though Martha tried to reach out, I maintained my boundaries. I realized that protecting my children meant sometimes making tough choices, including cutting ties with family members who wouldn't respect our family unit. As I held my twins close, I reflected on the journey we had taken. It was a hard-fought battle, but I had learned the importance of standing up against toxic behavior, not just for myself, but for my children. This experience had strengthened my bond with Ethan, and together we created a loving home where our children could thrive. Our story didn't end with the court's decision. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter future. I would always fight for my family, and no one would ever take that away from us again.